Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, a way too early discussion around this South Carolina program and talking about potential positions that Shane Beamer in South Carolina might want to address as that spring transfer portal window is going to be coming around. Now, yeah, it's a very early discussion when we don't even know what names are going to be in the spring transfer portal window. I look at this discussion as almost an ability for us to preview spring practice for South Carolina and identify those positions that we're looking for and say, hey, these might be the question marks for this South Carolina team heading into 2025. I've been very vocal that when you have a quarterback like Lenore Sellers, the ceiling for a team with a guy like Lenore Sellers is extremely high. There are a lot of bright spots on this South Carolina roster, especially the young talent that continues to get better within this program. But on the same token, there are also some question marks around this roster as well that we'll be paying attention to as spring practice comes around. What positions might those be? And could there be answers in the spring transfer portal window for South Carolina to fill in those cracks? That's the conversation I want to get into. Before we do, and as always, to the South Carolina fans, I think most notably, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Look, you can look at this roster and depth chart and say, yeah, there's a couple of different positions you could argue that you would like to see South Carolina go out and address in that spring portal window. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys for the last couple of months. It's been really fun talking this program. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let it fly in the comment section. Without further ado, let's get into this one. Now, let's start with something I really like about South Carolina, and that is the offensive line going into spring practice. I think you feel really darn good about. It's a combination of one, you went to the transfer portal, you grabbed some experienced cats and guys like Boaz Stanley, Nick Sharp, Rodney Newsom, all guys that have starting experience at their previous stops. You also have a ton of young talent that's only getting better with further development. True freshman Josiah Thompson played really well at the end of 2024. Tree Babalade, Trevon Ball going into year 3. And guy like Cam Pringle, Marky Anderson. It's a nice mix of proven veteran talent, young talent that's getting better. And I think the last thing is it's really deep. Not only can you see a really strong starting 5 going out for South Carolina, but you look at the depth, 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that you might trust playing some really quality football for South Carolina up front. You're in a good spot. Whenever you feel good about your offensive line, it makes addressing the transfer portal that much easier because it's hard. It's hard to address the offensive line in the portal. Other positions, it's not so hard. Feeling good about the offensive line heading into spring practice, to me, that's massive. And what Shane Beamer's been doing on the high school recruiting trail, stacking blue chip talent like Trevon Baugh, Tree Babalade, Josiah Thompson, Marky Anderson, Cam Pringle, all of which were blue chips coming out of high school, that's paying off. And I think will pay off for South Carolina in 2025. And it kind of frees you up to say, hey, what are the other positions that we might want to fill in the gaps? I think the biggest question mark that I have, look, no question marks about quarterback, no question marks about running back, no question marks about the offensive line, in my personal opinion. I know South Carolina fans might feel differently. It's the pass catchers. I like the process that Shane Beamer kind of went through where, look, there were some really good wide receivers in the transfer portal, but Shane Beamer did not participate in those, for lack of better terms, bidding wars. I think Shane Beamer's strategy, his process, his thought process was, let's let the guys that we've recruited out of high school, let's give them the opportunity to show they can be difference makers first. And if we leave spring practice saying, all right, maybe another year for a guy like Malik Clark, maybe another year for a guy like Brian Rowe, maybe these freshmen might need 1 year before they're ready to play, then you can go out and go try to add some wide receivers in the portal. Now, what kind of wide receivers would you be looking for? That's the next conversation. I think for me, it starts with, can you find a blend of guys that have played a solid amount of football, but also offer you some of that high upside? One name that, I mean, South Carolina fans probably are familiar with is Adam Randall. And this is a kid that, yeah, he's dealt with some injuries at Clemson. I think it's also worth noting that Look, Clemson hit on a couple of wide receivers last year. And you talk about TJ Moore, you talk about Brian Westcott, you talk about Antonio Williams coming back. I think Adam Randall in a lot of different programs is probably a starting wide receiver, but for Clemson going into 2025, he might not be. He might even change positions to running back if he's a guy that goes through spring practice and maybe says, "Hey, I'd like to find a different opportunity where I can get on the football field a little bit more." Former South Carolina kid from Myrtle Beach. This would make a ton of sense for South Carolina because one, you get a guy that's played some football, right? He's played a decent amount of football for Clemson over the last couple of years and has flashed those coming out of high school, but has never put it together consistently. Go bet on Adam Randall. I mean, he's 6'3", 215 pounds that runs an 11-second 100-meter dash. The size speed combination, it's a problem. And we talk about this all the time. What does Lenore Sellers do the best? Push the ball vertically down the field. Adam Randall can be another guy like Nick Harbor that can challenge defensive backs working vertically down the field. To me, if Adam Randall, and it would make sense for Adam Randall to maybe hit the transfer portal, this would be an option for South Carolina that I think would make a lot of sense. Now, another conversation here is let's look at historically, going back to last year, who was Lenore Sellers' favorite pass catcher? It was the tight end, Joshua Simon. In the Mike Shula offense, it's been the tight ends that they like to run the passing game through, going back to his time at Carolina with Greg Olson. I love Michael Smith. Love Michael Smith going into year two. Do you want to add one more difference maker at the tight end box? I look at Jordan Dingle and say, hey, I like Jordan Dingle because he can run block like the best of them. But we kind of know he's not going to be a difference maker in the pass catching department. A guy that I would look at that has kind of loved him out of high school in Jelani Thurman. He's at Ohio State right now. Now, what happened with Ohio State is they went out and paid money for the best tight end in the portal in Max Clare. So Jelani Thurman was kind of primed to be the guy for Ohio State going into 2025. Probably going to take a backseat to Max Clare. We know Ohio State does not run a lot of 12 personnel because of all the talent they have at wide receiver. They're going to try to want to get those wide receivers on the football field. Jelani Thurman, to me, is a tight end one caliber guy that might not have the opportunity at Ohio State to be that tight end one. If he comes out of spring practice, maybe looking for an opportunity to be more involved in the pass catching department on his offense. Jelani Thurman would make a lot of sense too. And what I love about Jelani Thurman was never a guy that I thought would be an elite run blocker coming out of high school. He's up to 6'6", 260, carries the weight exceptionally well. He can get it done in the run blocking department and give you probably higher upside from a pass catching standpoint than a guy like Jordan Dingle. And again, a lot of the conversation when you talk about building around Lenore Sellers goes to the wide receivers. Well, guess what? The tight end position in this South Carolina offense, specifically with a guy like Lenore Sellers, might be just as important and probably be a lot cheaper to address too. A guy like Jelani Thurman might make some sense too. Outside of the pass catchers, I look at the offense and say I feel really good about where South Carolina sits on offense. Now, you go to the defense, and this is probably priority number one, right? The middle of the defense, both the interior defensive line and the linebackers. There's just not a ton of proven guys. Go through spring practice. Let's see where a guy like Xavier Hardy is coming in from the JUCO ranks. Gabriel Brown-Laudindi, a guy that has a ton of upside. You want to be deep there. And one of the things that made South Carolina so great is they were deep there last year. I mean, not only TJ Sanders, but you're talking about Tonka, you're talking about the guy like Huntley as well. That privilege to be able to rotate those guys in and out and keep them fresh for not only 4 quarters of a football game, but also 12 plus games. Look at South Carolina's aspirations, college football playoffs, at least in my opinion. If you want to play your best football in November and December, you got to be deep along the lines of scrimmage. And if you want to win games consistently in the SEC, you got to be deep along the lines of scrimmage. I don't think they're deep enough yet. And I think that's where a lot of South Carolina fans probably feel the same way. What names could we I guess the more important conversation to me is what kind of bodies would South Carolina be looking for in the transfer portal? To me, it's the big body run stoppers. Look, I look at the pass rush and say, as long as you got a guy like Dylan Stewart, the pass rush is going to be just fine. how do you maximize your pass rushes? Hey, you got to win on first and second down. You got to be able to create those third and long situations that give Dylan Stewart the opportunity to say, oh, we're in 3rd and 8 right now. I can pin my ears back and go get after the passer. You want to be able to put Dylan Stewart in these edge rushers in that position as much as possible. If you want to do that, you got to be really good at the linebacker and defensive line spot. I don't know if they're good enough yet. A couple of names that I think would be interesting. Again, we don't know if these names are going to be in the portal, but if they are in the portal, these would be the names I would look at. Dominique Orange from Iowa State. I mean, the perennial run stopper, 6'4", 340, fire hydrant body, doesn't get moved off the line of scrimmage, eats up double teams really well. Not going to be a crazy stat sheet stuffer, so to speak, but going to do a lot of dirty work that allows South Carolina to put their defenses in these third and long spots where Dylan Stewart can kind of get unleashed a little bit. Another one, Dante Corleone from Cincinnati. Another guy that probably could have gone to the NFL draft, decided to come back. These would be the guys. And again, we talk about NIL, we talk about budgeting your resources. If I'm South Carolina and I'm entering in to the spring transfer portal window, the most important thing that I'd be willing to spend on is interior defensive line. Because if you can get that box checked, I think this defense has a very good chance of kind of holding serve and being the dominant defense that we saw in 2024. And if you get that with a massive step from the offense that I think we are going to see take place, it makes this team extremely dangerous. But how can you hold serve on defense? How can you maintain that dominant defense that we saw in 2024? To me, it doesn't happen unless you address the inside of the defensive line, not only from a talent standpoint, but from a depth standpoint too. Those are the positions that, one, we're going to be looking at in spring practice and say, hey, what are the names we're hearing some buzz on? And then secondly, those are probably the positions that I would project in the next couple of weeks when that spring transfer portal window opens that South Carolina decides to pursue pretty heavily. We'll get out of here on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If there are any other positions that you think I'm missing, maybe the off-ball linebacker spot, please let it fly in the comments section. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.